Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our strawberry patch makeover. First of all, we cleared the old area, got rid of all the weeds. Now we're going to be planting up an entirely new strawberry patch with loads of new strawberry plants. We're going to have 4 different varieties that will be fruiting throughout the summer. And we'll also be talking about potted strawberries as well. We're planting up some of those too. So there's lots in store for this episode, so keep watching. So this is how the old patch is looking right now. I've got a big rock there for some reason. I've just moved off of the new patch. We've got here some strawberries that I pulled out from the ground. My old original strawberries, we're going to be potting up some of those. And at the back we've got some of my potato plants and a dwarf crabapple in a pot, just to make use of this area. We will also have lots more potted potatoes going here very soon. And this area right here at the top of the plot is where the new strawberry patch is going to be. Reason why it's going here, well, this area gets probably the most sunshine on my allotment, and strawberries love a lot of sunshine, and I know that the size should be absolutely perfect for my existing strawberry cages. Behind me here are the cages that I pulled out from the original patch, and this is what I use to cover my strawberries so that they don't get eaten by rodents and birds. They're here for now, but they will be going back over to that patch. But first of all, we're going to talk about the strawberry varieties that I've chosen and then get planting. So first of all, we're just going to head up to the polytunnel, which is where I've been growing my strawberries that I bought bare root a few weeks ago, and they've been growing in modules inside the polytunnel where they've been brought on very quickly, and they're looking pretty good. We've got loads of new growth on them, and here they are. Been growing in these module trays. We've got 4 different varieties in here, but I'm just so pleased to see that they're all looking so healthy and lush. And oh look, already got a little flower. So which varieties have I chosen? Well, my first one is called Honey-O, and this is an early season strawberry. So I'm expecting it to be harvesting from very early June, maybe into July. It's said to be quite sweet, but others report a bit of a tartness to the flavour. But I think as long as you're harvesting them when they're all fully red, and then you know that they're ripe and ready for harvest. So Honey-O is my first choice. As for my second choice, I've chosen a Cambridge favourite, which is a very popular variety here in the UK. It's got the RHS Award of Garden Merit, the AGM, which means it's got their seal of approval for disease resistance, pest resistance, flavour and crop as well. So I couldn't not grow that one. I've never tried it before, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the fuss is all about. And my late season variety that I've chosen is called Florence, which just happens to be one of my favourite cities after discovering it on my honeymoon quite recently. So I just had to choose that one. I haven't found much about the flavour, but I'm looking forward to giving it a try. This one is also said to have very good disease and pest resistance. As for my fourth variety, well, this one's a bit different because it's actually a pine berry. It's a white strawberry and it has red seeds, so it's very unusual, and I actually did grow it a few years ago, and the flavour is just so unique because it tastes like pineapple, and I'm not kidding. Some people I don't think get that, but as long as they're fully ripe, you know, the strawberry has to be completely white, verging on pink. They take on a bit of a pink tinge when they're very ripe. You don't want to be harvesting them when there's even a touch of green on this one. And the variety is actually called Anna Blanca, which is also known as Snow White. I grew them in pots and they dried out and died, and I haven't managed to get hold of them for a few years, and I just kind of forgot about them, I guess. So I'm really excited to be growing a white strawberry again, and I'm going to have so many strawberries in the coming years. So yes, going to be growing them again, really excited. I should have pointed out that the strawberry varieties that I've chosen are classed as June bearing varieties, which means that they'll all produce their fruit in or around the month of June. But the late one, the Florence, will probably crop in July, maybe even going into August. It's just a rough name that's given to this type of plant. You can also get ever-bearing varieties, and these ones will fruit twice a year, not as the name suggests all the year round, but you'll get a crop in the summer and then you'll also get a crop in the early autumn months as well. So you get a bit of a double whammy, but the drawback is that the fruits tend to be smaller. You don't really get as many as the June bearing, and also they don't send off as many runners, which may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But the most commercially grown one is the June bearing, and I've chosen them because they give you big fruits, they give you a huge yield, generally at once, but also scattered, because the June berries are then divided into their mid, early, and late season. And as much as I want them scattered throughout the year a little bit, I also prefer to have yield to harvest at once so I can make jam. So for instance, if they were all ever bearing, I might only be harvesting like a handful every now and then, whereas I do want good quantities that I can then freeze and create different kinds of preserves with. So I think overall it's just about choosing varieties that first of all are what you want to be growing and how you want to be harvesting them, but also thinking about your soil, your conditions. You know, perhaps you get a lot of late frosts where you are, which might mean you want something that's going to fruit later on. You know, also lastly, just what grows well in your region. Is there a really well-known variety that you can get hold of very easily because it's going to do well? So yeah, there's a lot to consider when choosing your varieties. Just think about what it is that you really want and how you want to be eating them. Another reason why I've chosen not to go for the ever-bearing is because when it comes to autumn, I actually enjoy my autumn fruits, you know, my raspberries and my blackberries, and I just get the feeling that by then I may have forgotten about the strawberries and I may not really be wanting them as much because my other fruits are then providing for me, particularly the hedgerow. I get so many blackberries here, and so yeah, just thought I'd point that out, that you know there's a lot of other crops also demanding my attention around early autumn. And you know, it's all also about harvesting. How are you going to harvest them? Have you got the hands and the time to do so? And I just think that harvesting strawberries in late August, September isn't probably going to be my priority. I know I want to be in the hedgerow getting all my autumn raspberries and blackberries. Now this area is now ready to plant, and I did debate, can't really see you, excuse me, I did debate about using a landscape matting to prevent things like bindweed from coming up, because as you know, the patch next to it that we've just wood chipped and put plastic over gets bindweed, and that is going to start running and finding a new place to grow. And I thought, I don't really want it coming up here. And it also grows in the border up by the top of the gate, pops up here and there as it would anywhere. And I thought maybe I should put down some matting, and I thought long and hard about it, and I think actually it's easier not to have it. First of all, we don't need extra. Hello Robin, you really are getting very friendly. Let's see if you'll come on camera with us. So I really don't need any extra plastic being near the soil, and the landscape fabric does disintegrate a lot quicker than your thick, heavy duty plastic like what we've used in the wood chip area, and they'll just carry on travelling under it and popping up, you know, what would be in that border over there, which I really don't want because it's planted up with roses and lots of perennials, and I don't need more of it in there. So I've decided no matting, no fabric. We're just going to plant directly into the soil, which means I should be able to weed it easier. And if I get any bindweed, I'll just pull it up as soon as I see it, and hopefully that will wear it down and just keep it hoed, keep hoeing. And it's really important that we space our plants so that there's enough distance between them that you can fit your hoe, so that you can scrape off any seedlings as soon as they come up. One thing that I have been doing is been using this, which is now my bindweed bucket, and I'll just periodically go around and take out any roots or shoots that I see popping up. It will stay in here where I can either burn it, bag it. I tend to keep it away from my compost bin because I just don't trust the stuff. And you can see here I've got some roots that I've not yet dug up, and I'll just put it straight into my bindweed bucket. And it's nice to have that close by, so you're not going to be risking dropping it anywhere else if you like to throw and launch your weeds into a wheelbarrow. You don't want them going elsewhere. Look, gosh, this stuff is everywhere. Unfortunately, I soon realised there's a lot more bindweed in this patch of soil than I originally anticipated, which meant I spent the next half hour or more pulling it all out, and then actually decided to dig it over. Now, digging is something that I try and refrain from doing. I try and be as no dig as possible, but sometimes you've just got to get it out. I'm now just using a combination of my cultivation claw just to break up some of the lumps into smaller pieces, and my rake, so that we've got a good working surface to plant into that's not quite as rough and a little bit finer and flatter for us to start. I then applied some sulfate of potash to the soil. This is essentially potassium, which is a really essential nutrient for a lot of plants to produce flowers, and strawberries are very hungry plants, so they need all the nutrients they can get. I then just raked this through the soil and then started to space out my plants. Now, I'm not usually that strict with it when it comes to straight lines and spacing, but for this I really wanted to get it right, so I'm spacing them about 30 centimetres between each plant and each row as well. And by doing this, it means that I'm going to be able to weed them very easily by using a hoe and running it along the lines, because I've made sure that there's enough room for my hoe to fit in between all the plants to keep those weeds down. And it's really important when you're planting strawberries not to plant them too deep, so the crown is like the center point of the plant where it comes out of the leaves, and you want to make sure that that's slightly above the soil. You don't want to be planting the center of the plant too deep, otherwise they might rot. You could also apply a bloodfish and bone to the planting hole to get the roots off to a really good start. So I basically just went along and planted them all in the same method, making sure that crown didn't sit too deep, and then just firm it gently into the ground. After I finished each row, I gave them a really good drink, because this was filmed on quite a windy day and that was already drying these little plants out quite quickly. Then it was just a case of mulching the surface, and I chose to use a well-rotted manure, and this will do a few things such as feeding the soil with lots more nutrients. The worms will take this down into the soil, so there's no need to dig it in, and also it will help trap in the moisture so that the plants stay nice and hydrated over the summer months. It's also going to help stop the weeds from coming through as well. So what about growing strawberries in containers? Well, it can be done, and it can be done in a lot of ways. You can use guttering, you can use round pots, long pots. Some people even use hanging baskets, although that comes with a bit of a warning, because strawberries like rich, wet, or damp, should I say, soil, and hanging baskets have a tendency to dry out very, very quickly. And in the summer months, you might find that you're watering them twice a day. So just choose your container wisely. Make sure you've got a good compost mix as well. In here, I've got probably about a 60-40 ratio of compost, being the 60%, to a bit of manure actually, because that will help retain the water. But you could also use something that's a bit more soil based. Basically, you want it to retain the water, because obviously containers dry out very quickly. So I've got here some of the remaining Cambridge favourite strawberries, and I will be planting them a little bit closer than what I did with the other ones. I can hear the robin's nest over there. The chicks sound very small. So yes, I'll be spacing these a bit closer, probably about 6 inches apart on these. And one of the pests that you're more likely to get when you're growing in containers is the vine weevil. And I had a comment from Ian, and he asks on the best way to control them. And unfortunately, vine weevil are one of them really annoying pests that are quite difficult to get rid of if you've got them already. The best way to, well, you're best off really just trying to avoid them as much as you can. And strawberries in containers are one of their absolute favourites, as well as heucheras. And what is it? So the pest is, the adult form is a beetle that eat the leaves of your plants, but the one that does most damage is actually the larval stage, the little grub that lives in the soil. It looks like a little white crescent-shaped maggot, and it eats all the roots of your plants to the point where it can very quickly kill them. So the best way to control them really is just to prevent them. And growing containers, it's quite difficult, but once you get your plants, if they're bought in a container from a nursery or a garden centre, just check the roots before you put them into your pots, because they might already have them. And they are quite a common pest in nurseries because obviously everything is pot grown. But you know, having grown these from bare roots, I know they won't have them in the soil because I put them in the soil myself. But yeah, once you've got them, really, you've just got to get rid of the plants, get rid of the soil that they're growing in, and start afresh. Because even if you're wanting to take the chemical approach, the adults come out at night time, and obviously they're a beetle, so they have a really hard shell. And I don't think there's many chemicals, there probably is, but obviously I don't use them, that would kill them. So I think you're best off just being very vigilant when you get your plants, and make sure your soil is all fresh and don't spread them anywhere else. And that's it. That's as easy as it is. Just need to give these a really good watering in now. And care tips, obviously make sure that they're well watered. The benefit of growing in containers is that you can actually move them. So if you're growing at home, you know, when they're close to ripening, you can put them near your back door or your front door so that you can just nip out and harvest them when they're ready. In terms of protection from predators, you could, you know, make up your own chicken wire frame if you wanted to, or perhaps if you're growing in a round pot, you could upturn the hanging basket, you know, the wire part, put a bit of chicken wire on, and then put that over the top, that sort of thing. Your main problems are probably going to be slugs and snails because they like to live underneath pots. So perhaps if you get some pot feet or a couple of bricks just to raise it off the ground, that will help. And it'll also improve the drainage as well if you get any heavy rain. There are so many little flies around. Woo! Another benefit of having them in a container is that you can move them into someplace warm to bring them on earlier. So I could put these in my polytunnel and they'll fruit earlier than if they were outside. Just remember that would mean you've got to water them more because they're going to get hotter and drier quicker. Just remember that strawberries can prolifically multiply themselves in 1 year. So don't feel like you've got to buy 50 plants to start a strawberry patch. You could start with 5 or 10. By the end of the year, you could have lots of baby plants that you can use to increase your crop over the coming years. And it's worth noting that, because I don't think I've said it yet, but strawberries will always fruit best in their second and third year. In their first year, don't expect too much and they're going to be small, but you will get some. But the second and third year is when they really start to produce a bumper crop. And then after that, they say it's best to start rotating your plants. So keep a few of the babies from the runners and then ditch the old ones, because after a few years, probably 4 years, is when they'll start to decline and they won't produce quite such a heavy crop. And that's all there is to it. Growing in containers is a great way if you're short on space or if you don't have an allotment or a garden. Just stick a pot on your doorstep and nurture it, and soon you'll be harvesting delicious sweet strawberries that have been warmed by the sunshine. They're chemical free, they didn't come in any plastic packaging, and they just taste so much better than what you get in the shops. Now that method for growing in containers is exactly what I'll be doing with the strawberries that I saved from my original patch. My original strawberries that I'm quite attached to because they've been here ever since I had the allotment. They were from a neighbouring plot and somebody gave me them, and then I obviously grew my amount of plants from that one and I've had them ever since. But because they were growing in this patch where there was lots of bindweed and ground elder, one thing I will be doing is washing the plants and the roots to make sure there's no traces of that weed that I'm going to be potting up into the trough, because I don't want to be spreading it even further. But if I do find a bit, at least I can pull it out and it's containerized, so it's not going to be spreading into my beds. And because these plants will already be a couple of years old, these are probably going to give me a heavier harvest than what my brand new plants will, because they're not even, you know, a year old yet. But yeah, you can see traces of that ground elder here in the roots, so I will be getting rid of all of that. Well, the cages are all secured into the soil, the edges dug down into the ground so no rodents are going to get underneath and steal the strawberries or get stuck. And the lids, well, they're on the top to prevent the birds from getting in, but they will still allow the pollinators in. So the bees, they can fly safely through this chicken wire and get back out again without any trouble whatsoever. And now we've just got to wait for the strawberries to come. You might find that if you're not using cages, you want another method to secure your precious strawberries. Well, you can use netting, but please, if you're going to do so, be really responsible, because it's one of the things in our gardens that can cause a lot of damage to wildlife and sometimes even kill animals. So just be careful if you are going to use netting. Make sure it's nice and taut. There's nothing loose at the edges where a small bird might get its foot stuck, because yeah, birds, rodents, foxes, whatever other creatures you have native to your area are really likely to get stuck in it if it is out. So make sure you put it away also when you've finished using it. If you don't want to use netting, a technique that I've heard, but I haven't actually tried before, to prevent birds from taking your berries, is to gather some small stones about the size of a strawberry, paint them red and scatter them around your plants. And apparently the birds go in and peck them thinking they're berries, to find that they're rock hard and they don't like that sensation. So then when your actual strawberries are there and ripe, they don't bother because they think, oh, I'm not going to peck that, it's like a rock. So let me know if you've tried this technique before. I certainly haven't, but I'm intrigued to know if it works. Now, I've mulched my strawberries with well-rotted manure, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, obviously to feed the soil. It's got lots of nitrogen in it. Nitrogen is one of the essential nutrients that plants need to make green growth. So that's really going to help with all the leafy growth that it's going to put out. But also, mulches in the UK can work very differently to other areas around the world. Because we have quite wet summers sometimes, we're not likely to use things like wood chip or straw as much as they do in other countries. So it is quite common practice to put straw underneath your strawberries and around your plants to prevent them from getting wet. So as it rains, the rain will splash onto the soil, and then that splash will come back up onto the strawberry, or the strawberries might sit on damp soil and get very wet, and that will cause them to rot. So it is quite common practice to put straw underneath them. And I've done that for a couple of years until I realised that if we have a wet summer, which we're getting quite a bit, it actually just makes really wet, soggy straw, and then it attracts slugs and snails, and then it becomes a breeding ground for them, and then they just feast on all your berries. So it works in certain situations and certain summers here in the UK, but not all of them. For me now, the most important thing is to make sure I'm keeping the weeds out. I'll be regularly weeding in between all the plants, making sure that bindweed isn't going to appear, and make sure that they're well watered if we have dry spells. Obviously it's going to rain quite heavily tomorrow, so that will help sink them into the ground because there's lots of air pockets there. But yeah, otherwise they're quite low maintenance plants, but I'll keep you posted on how they're doing. And watch out for runners in the summertime. Those are the little baby plants that come off of your main plants. You can use them to propagate your stock and get extra plants for free. But for me personally, because these are brand new young plants, I want all of their energy to go into their roots and development and fruits. So I will be cutting off those runners as they appear in late summer. I'm now just so excited for the first taste of strawberries this summer. Really is one of my favourite fruits to grow. Thank you for watching and joining me on this little project. Let me know what you're growing this year. If you've got a particular strawberry variety that you like, let me know in the comments. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.